Okay, let me first say sorry about the audio. I know I probably sound like I'm in a closet, but I'm recording these from school and that's how it sounds. We are going to, you as a B schedule student, you are going to watch this lecture video to finish out the notes so that you are ready and have them fully completed to take your Unit 1 quiz tomorrow in class. And so keep in mind that's an open notes quiz, but we didn't have time to finish the notes packet last week. So today's at-home assignment is to watch this lecture, finish out your notes packet, and have that ready to go for tomorrow's in-class open notes quiz. Okay, so we are in the next section of our notes that talks about the education in society. And so let's start with a quick working definition. This is not what you would find if you went to Webster's Dictionary and looked up the definition of education, but this is a working definition of what education is in and to and for society. It's a social institution through which society provides its members with all kinds of important knowledge. So recognizing that education is a social institution is pretty important. And I think that we have seen, as we've talked about, the historical perspective of public education in this country, how it really functioned to build people that could make good decisions in a newly formed democracy, people that could have high civic virtue and could sort of operate for the common good instead of just themselves. Let's clear up a little bit of language when it comes to education in our country. We see these terms: primary, secondary, post-secondary. So primary currently is kindergarten through 5th grade. Kindergarten used to not be a mandatory component of public education. It was optional. It got you ready for 1st grade. But now K through 5th is considered part of the expectation for public school. And that's what we would call really elementary, generally speaking, primary. Secondary is going to be 6th through 12th grade. And so that will include both middle and high school. And then anything beyond 12th grade, college, even graduate studies or medical school, law school, that's going to be post-secondary education. Post-secondary indicating after secondary is finished. Colleges are a little bit different in this country, and all of you are seniors, and so many of you are probably looking at different types of colleges. So a junior or community college, we have one of those downtown, JCTC. These are typically 2-year programs that allow you to get some gen ed credits, and many of these integrate associate's degrees. So for example, you could go to a 2-year program to become an HVAC repair technician, or you could go to a 2-year program and become kind of the starting level of a nurse. Or you could roll those credits into a 4-year college. So when we talk about 4-year, there are 4-year state colleges, and then there are 4-year private colleges. State colleges like the University of Kentucky and Western and Eastern and U of L, they are in part funded by tax dollars, which is why 4-year states are a bit cheaper than 4-year privates. However, they are, do not hear me say they are cheap. Some of the money is provided by tax dollars, but not all of it. And so there is still going to be a tuition for a 4-year state school. And it's up to you to provide that tuition. So whether you get scholarships or grants or even federal loans to provide your portion of the tuition, that's a little bit about the money side of a 4-year state school. In a 4-year private school, there's no tax money associated to private schools. And a lot of private schools maintain that they are private because they are religiously affiliated, and they're not really interested in the government coming in and having any say over what they do, which is what happens when they give you money, when the government gives you money. So 4-year private is funded primarily by tuition. Again, how you cover that tuition is scholarships, grants, federal loans, traditional loans. And then they also have typically large donors or people that have perhaps been alumni that give money in their will when they die. And so they are funded in part by donations as well. Types of school. Public schools, we know the public aspect means that they are paid for by taxpayers' dollars. And because of that, there is more state and federal control over things like what is taught in school, the curriculum, and even the amount of time that must be spent in school, the number of days and the number of hours. Private schools are paid by tuition. And we talked about a lot of our private schools here in Louisville are within the Catholic school system or the parochial school system, but there are others, KCD, Collegiate, St. Francis. They are, even though St. Francis sounds like it's Catholic, those schools are not religiously affiliated, but they are still private. And so students pay a tuition. That allows them a lot more freedom as a school to be able to tailor their curriculum and even unique opportunities that can exist within the school day. The number of days that they have to go to school is a little bit different. And so private school, paid for by parents' money, offers kind of a different set of expectation. And then there's also homeschool. Homeschool, it is as it sounds, you are educating your child at home. Very few people in the U.S. actually are homeschooled, although we have a larger homeschooling culture here within Oldham County, even extending a little bit into Jefferson County. I would argue that that has to do with our demographics. Certain socioeconomic ranges lend themselves to homeschool a little bit better because both parents don't have to work. And so one of the parents can stay home and do the homeschooling. But only 3%, currently 3% of the U.S. are homeschooled. In our district, the curriculum for a homeschool, if you decide that you want to homeschool your child, you report that to the district, and then the district reports that to the state. The state will ask for curriculum. And so what you are teaching your child at home does have to be approved and must meet certain expectations for schooling. The last section of notes are about education reform. And so there are two things that U of L has in their syllabus that we need to be aware of when it comes to education reform. Now, I know that Senate Bill 1 is listed first in your notes, but we're actually going to talk about CARA, the second one in your notes first, because timeline-wise, CARA came first. So you read an article and did an assignment on Google Classroom last week that gave you a little bit of a foundation over CARA. You know, hopefully at this point, that it stands for the Kentucky Education Reform Act. This was passed in 1990, and it was passed as a piece of legislation in response to the Kentucky Supreme Court ruling that schools in our state were both inefficient and inequitable. So looking at schools across the state, they just weren't cutting it. And so legislators drafted this bill, this Reform Act, and it was approved in 1990. Now, it had three basic areas of focus for the reform that was going to happen in our state. The first area of focus was based on money. The second area was based on governance, or how the schools governed themselves. And then the third area was based on curriculum. And so we have a slide for each one of these that we're going to go over. Let's take a look at this diagram first before words pop up on the screen. This diagram titled Rich Kids, Poor Kids shows that in 1990, if you follow in 1990, when CARA was approved and began to enact, or became active, there was quite a large funding gap between students that lived in rural, typically poor pockets of our state, compared to students that lived in wealthy counties. And so in 1990, there was about a $1,500 per student discrepancy between rich kids and poor kids. And that really is due to the fact that if you lived in a wealthy area, your education budget was supplemented by income taxes in your wealthy area. And so you got more money just based on tax dollars. You pulled more money in larger, wealthier pockets of the state, and you were able to add that to the money that the state was giving. And so Kara came in and really changed that in an attempt to level the playing field and reduce this gap, this disparity. And so here in our notes, the first tenet of Kara finance, you should know that prior to Kara, schools were funded in a small part by the state, but in large part by their local government and tax dollars. And so if you lived in a wealthy area, you got lots of tax dollars funneled towards education. But if you didn't, you didn't get much tax money funneled towards you, which meant that your resources, educationally speaking, were a lot less. And perhaps that could lead to your brain thinking that the education that they acquired was not as high, or didn't have as high standards as it did in other pockets, which just perpetuates the cycle of poverty. So this created a huge disparity between schools that existed in wealthy counties compared to schools that existed in poor counties. And so one thing that Kara did is they established that there would be less supplemented by the local government and more by the state to level that playing field. So instead of everybody getting a set amount, dollar amount, let's say you get $1,000 per student from the state. Well, if you're in a wealthy area, you might not get that $1,000 because you can supplement with your own local tax income base. If you're in a poor area that doesn't bring in as much tax money for education, you might get more than $1,000. And so this is really an attempt to reduce the gap. And you can see that over the span of 7 years, it worked. And the gap between rich kids and poor kids was reduced to just $580. You'll notice, though, we climb back up, and this last data point was 4 years ago. We're back up to almost where we were, and there's a reason. So state funding begins to get cut. And as state funding gets cut, the districts that relied heavily on state funding, their amounts dropped significantly. And then we're back up to, if the state is providing less, so initially in 1990, the state is providing 80%, local is only supplementing 20%, but as state funding goes down, then local revenue has to come up. And again, if you're in a place that has good local income, then you're back up to receiving lots of money in your school system. But if you don't have a lot of taxpayer dollars coming in, then you have less money in your school system. And so that disparity now exists currently, unfortunately. When it came to the second tenet, governance, the biggest thing that came out of Kara was the creation of SBDMs. So SBDMs stand for school-based or sometimes site-based decision-making councils. These are an attempt to let each school run itself, essentially. You have to follow basic rules and guidelines from the district, which are funneled down from the state, which are funneled down from the federal government. But the day in and day out of the school, when your bell schedule is set, how many periods you offer in a day, what curriculum you're going to, or curriculum resources you're going to pursue, that is all controlled by the school. And so your SBDM always includes the principal, and then there will be 3 elected teachers and 2 elected parents. The teacher representatives are elected by the other teachers in the school, and the parent representatives are elected by the other parents at the school. And so you have this elected committee that serves a 3-year term, and together they have some say over the running of the school. Your 3 teacher representatives are Miss Beck, Mr. Likens, and then myself. We are all in our 2nd year of a 3rd-year term on SBDM. What a year, COVID and all, to be in charge of or sitting on this council that helps make school decisions. So here are the roles of SBDM. We don't specifically hire teachers and staff, but we confirm or affirm hiring. Mr. Wallace gathers a hiring committee together, interviews candidates, and then they make a recommendation to SBDM. We affirm that recommendation. We have some say over money that is funneled towards textbook and instructional materials. We have to approve the school safety plan every year, and we create policy, and we also, every year, we have to read through all of our existing policies. So last year, I read through every policy related to North Oldham, whether it was academic or athletic, read through it all. And then anytime we want to change, we read through it each year to make sure that we don't want to make any changes. Anytime we change or write policy, that is SBDM's doing as well. The third tenet of educational reform in CARA was under curriculum. And so we saw the creation of the CATS and CARIS testing system. Basically, this was a statewide accountability test. Now, you know that we still do that today in the form of K-Prep. But prior to 1990, we didn't. You could kind of teach whatever you wanted, and there really wasn't a testing system to know if teachers were doing what they were supposed to in teaching and kids were actually learning. And so CATS and CARIS came about, and it included content testing. It also included a very large written portfolio, as well as how you did on the ACT test. And so as a school, you were given a rating under this CATS and CARIS system. You hope to see each school work towards showing growth every 2 years. And you were assessed on schools received either a novice, apprentice, proficient, or distinguished rating. Now, I was in high school under this system at Mail in Jefferson County, and I remember it was our goal 98% proficiency in our state testing. And so that very much is something that is seared into my brain and continued until around 2010. And then we shifted our accountability system. CARA also allowed schools to match technology funds, allowed the state to match, schools and states could match technology funds. So that was sort of the last big thing that CARA did. Now, if we transition to Senate Bill 1, this is another educational reform act that was originally passed in 2009. And there continue to be revisions. This is the current educational reform bill that we are operating under today. Senate Bill 1 shifted the accountability system just a little bit. And so a couple of key aspects of Senate Bill 1, they revised accountability in the preschool through 12th grade system. And I'll talk about that new accountability system here in just a second. It's a 5-star system, and how you accumulate stars is based on several different things. Senate Bill 1 also called for our standards for the core content classes that we teach to be either national or international standards. You cannot, as a state, continue to create your own standards for classes, which is exactly what we were doing prior. And so in science, I remember one big shift that occurred prior to Senate Bill 1 and prior to us adopting a national set of science standards called NGSS. Kentucky wrote their own science standards. And so in our kind of southern conservative pocket of the country, we had science standards that did not permit did not include, I won't say that it didn't permit, you didn't get in trouble if you taught them in all counties, in some you did, but it did not include the concept of evolution in biology. Well, now that we are national standards, evolution is taught as a standard practice in biology. So Senate Bill 1 changed our standards. And then it also required or called for more collaboration between secondary and post-secondary schools. And so very tangibly, what you can see From that is the creation and the offering of a lot of dual credit classes and amping up the AP courses that sort of offer you a taste of college and sort of blend curriculum in the high school setting into college so that you're more prepared. The last thing that is important here about Senate Bill 1 is they created what's called safe schools. And so a lot of the safety protocol that we have in our schools today is following Senate Bill 1 legislation. And so that these are laws. This is the reason why we practice fire, tornado, earthquake drills. This is the reason why every school has to have a safety plan that is approved by their SBDM and is on file for the school to know how to operate. This is why we practice active shooter and lockdown drills. This is why all of our doors, our classroom doors, are supposed to be locked and closed. One product of Safe Schools said that students during instructional hours, students should be behind locked and closed and locked doors in the school building. This is why we don't go outside a lot. We can't walk out the front of our door and circle around the building to get into the 500s hallway if we're changing classes. We stay in the school building, we stay safe, we stay protected. That's a law of Safe Schools. It also requires your teachers to go through X amount of hours of school safety training every single summer in preparation for the next school year. Before I leave this page, I want to look at the 5-star accountability system. And so every school, let's see if it pulls this up. Every school is required, every school has an accountability rating. And so that's found in the form of a little school report card, and it's posted on the Kentucky Department of Education's website. And it's also posted on North Oldham's website as well. So schools don't hide their report cards. They're available for anyone to see. Here is our school rating. So we are 4 out of 5 stars. We were a 5-star school. We lost our 5th star 2 years ago, and here's why we lost it. So they always offer the reason for why you maybe are not 5 stars. We have a pretty significant academic achievement gap between students in our building with disabilities compared to students in our building that don't have disabilities. So testing wise and transition readiness, some of the things that we'll see down here, they're very different between students with disabilities and students without. And so because that gap is very large, we lost that star. We work every year to get that star back. Here is how you get your stars. There's a formula, but these are the basic parts of the formula. They are not all equally weighted within the formula, but you're looking for proficiency, which is, it comes from our literacy skills, our on-demand writings, academic testing that we do. So the science test, the content-based tests that we do, they fall in here for separate academics. Transition readiness, I believe transition readiness is all about if you have taken and passed AP tests and you're ready for college, or if you've taken like a skills program at the Arvin Center and you pass the ASVAB test, which says that you actually gained that skill while you were there and you're ready for the career field. And then graduation rate. So those are the things that roll together to give us our 5 stars. But look at this. You can even see this is our high school for proficiency, 90.1. That's very high. The overall district, 80.9. So we're high in the district. Here's the state rate for proficiency. So we are much higher than the state average. Same thing over here for academic standards, higher compared to the district average, higher than the state. As a school here, again, higher than the district, higher than the state, and also over here, higher than the district and higher than the state. So that's specific to your school if you're ever wondering, as it applies to Senate Bill 1 and accountability, how North does, there you have it. Last thing, I need for you to know that Senate Bill 1 also includes information. It's not just education. So it also includes information about other government workers, like people that work in the prison system, our police officers, our firefighters, our EMS, government employees. Information and laws regulating how they operate exist within Senate Bill 1 as well. There's information and laws related to immigration for our state in Senate Bill 1. And then there's also governance for teacher retirement and teacher pay. And so if you remember, about 2 years ago, if you remember teachers here seemingly upset, wearing a lot of red, standing out in front of the carpool line with our signs, Senate Bill 1 was being revised, and last minute revision prior to approving it was sort of snuck in that did some damage to the teacher retirement system and teacher benefits. And so the sneaky nature of it, plus the idea that we've been paying into a retirement system and we possibly wouldn't get that retirement back out by the time we did actually retire, did not sit well with a lot of educators. And so in the state of Kentucky, there were strikes, there were sick outs, there were all kinds of things happening across the state as a result of this. And so if you remember it, I'll just make a connection right here for you. That's what was going on. Okay, that ends this notes packet, and you are caught up. And you will be ready now with a completely filled out notes packet for your open notes quiz in class tomorrow.